Don't, jeez, Netflix, come on! God, warn a guy next time. The Cloverfield Paradox, the latest in the Cloverfield anthology series, or is it interconnected? I don't know. I really don't know. Cloverfield kicked off in 2008 with a very cunningly marketed ad campaign that didn't even tell us what the movie was called. We just knew it was going to be a found footage kaiju movie. And I watched it, and in lieu of the good direction and adequate acting, I still found the film to be kind of a bore for the same reason why I'm not particularly fond of found footage movies. It has to be really special to make me really love it. I mean, off the top of my head, the ones I really enjoyed were Chronicle and the first Paranormal Activity. But apart from that, narratively, they were all the same. It all came down to this. If it was going to be found footage, you had to find the footage. And in order for the footage to be lost to be found, the people doing the filming had to die. And unfortunately, the entire time watching that movie, I'm going, they gonna die. They gonna die. They gonna die. So the first Cloverfield didn't really blow my skirt up. When I heard that they were doing a second one, I didn't even give it any mind. But when people were actually raving that 10 Cloverfield Lane was fantastic, I was like, oh, well, that's refreshingly different. And I even looked at the trailers. I was like, that actually looks like something interesting. I finally, in preparation for this movie, finally got around to watching 10 Cloverfield Lane. And yes, I will say, that one had a nice, tight story, had a good, strong focus. Even the ending did a really good job connecting to the first Cloverfield movie, but it didn't feel so garish and out of whack that I didn't enjoy it. So yeah, 10 Cloverfield Lane, I would say, is definitely the best of these three. Now, on to the Cloverfield Paradox. Damn it, Netflix. In the very interesting tradition of the Cloverfield films, the marketing decided to just hit you with this one, sucker punched you with it, and you weren't really ready for it. Now, I wasn't ready for it either. I didn't really have any expectations. And here's the thing. I know there are going to be a lot of people who are fans of the Cloverfield films, and I'm sure they have expectations high up for this. Me, I had absolutely no expectations, which puts me in a very unique position. Now, because of that, is the Cloverfield Paradox actually worth a look? From where I stood, not really. For a person who's really not racking his brain trying to figure out how these things connect to each other, this thing was just, let's face it, it was a PG-13, borderlining on R-rated episode of Doctor Who for the most part. And it didn't help that the girl who played Tish Jones is the primary focus in this film. I don't want to take away from the merit that this film has, because I will say, and this is going to definitely be in its favor, production design, really good. The visual effects, actually pretty staggering. I'm going to say, all the actors. This is a top shelf cast, and definitely not the traditional sort, like the traditional leading man types, which I gotta say is one thing that's always worked for the Cloverfield franchise, is they always picked unconventional main actors. And in this one is definitely a good cross-section. I'll say, Gugu Mbatha-Raw, Tish Jones, was made for a strong leading lady in this one, and I'm always good with Daniel Bruhl. Anytime I see him, I'm always like, I'm good with it. Chris O'Dowd, you can always count on Chris O'Dowd to be the comic relief, but the problem is they shoehorned a lot of his jokes. Anytime you want him to actually be a character you invest in, he makes a joke and you're like, oh, that's right, I forgot that's your purpose here, to be the comic relief. It did not work, especially for someone as talented as Chris O'Dowd is. And then you got David Oyelowo. That guy impresses the heck out of me every time I see him. This guy goes from Martin Luther King to being Agent Callus on Rebels to this. I keep getting excited every time I see him because I'm always intrigued to see what new things he's going to do. And for extra measure, newcomer Elizabeth Debicki, who most people might remember as Aisha from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, plays a very multifaceted character here. So if there's any fault with this movie, it is definitely not the acting. The acting is wonderful. Let's get on to the stuff that really brought the movie down for me. First off, it's extremely tropey. It is incredibly tropey. I could pick out the beats as it kept going on, and in many cases it felt extremely choppy and a touch episodic. If this were a miniseries, it'd be, oh no, how are they going to get out of this one? Tune in next week. That's how I felt. It didn't help that it kept cutting back to her husband on Earth pretty much constantly like prodding at you, like going, ooh, what's this whole thing he's avoiding? Because he's got this whole story where he's found a girl who's been injured and he's going into a bunker to hide from what's going on up there. We already got the whole race against time, like world's in danger type thing. I get that they want to tie it into the other two films, but it feels completely separate from the rest of it. And really, when the primary dominant focus is meant to be on this crew and their whole mission, it feels intrusive. And I will say it leads to an ending, which I'm not going to spoil it because I know there are Cloverfield fans who really want to see this. But I'm going to say, for me, as an outsider who really isn't into the series as much as everyone else, I found that ending to be pretty damn out of character for the rest of it. I found it to be just, it had the subtlety of a bull going into a nitroglycerin plant. It was that erratic. It also riled me up because here we are building up to this big, I would even say potentially interesting story about them fringing onto alternate dimensions. Subplots about time paradoxes, I admit, they kind of get me hard. Figuratively speaking. Sometimes literally. And this was the stuff that at least kept me wanting to keep watching it all the way through, because I did find a lot of that stuff interesting. However, even then, that whole thing tended to trail off after a while, and you had a lot of stuff that just didn't really make sense, even by quantum physics standards. You got a lot of things that just sort of phased out after a while, and the movie just said, okay, we're done with that, let's move on to this whole thing. And then they jump into another twist which just didn't work. And I was getting frustrated. I was like going, okay, can we just move on? I mean, I kind of want to savor the inevitable victory that we're going to have. And we get to that inevitable victory, but then that gets robbed by the final shot of the movie. And here I'm going like, what was the point of any of this? If what they were doing tied a little bit closer into the whole Cloverfield thing, I suppose I would have been better. At least 10 Cloverfield Lane, I felt the permeating threat. In my mind, I kept going, I wonder if this has to do with what happened in the first film. And in a fashion, it did. So that worked for me. It worked really well for me. This one, no. Any attempts it had to link it to the first Cloverfield movie, or any of them, it just felt intrusive, it felt abrasive, it just felt absolutely wrong. I get the fact they're trying to make this whole grand Cloverfield universe, and I respect that, and I will say they're probably doing a lot better than a lot of other attempted shared universes, but by and large, the Cloverfield paradox is a pretty weak entry. If they're going to use it as a gateway into other stories, I hope it works, but in the meantime, I'm just going to have to give the Cloverfield paradox a... Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think this may be the linchpin that will bring further entries in the Cloverfield universe together? Or do you think that maybe the entire franchise just crashed and burned with this one movie? Leave it in the comments below. And for more addictive content and narcotic casserole, simply like, share, subscribe, click. Thou shalt be served.